Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa II, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you're not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you guys absolutely should be. They go live on Wednesdays or Thursdays, kind of depending on game schedule. So make sure you're checking that out. Omari, we do have real regular season Detroit Pistons basketball to talk about. But first, I think this morning is the biggest example of how different our lives are. So I want to give you a chance to tell the listeners what you did this morning, and then I will tell them what I did this morning, and I think everybody will understand my point. So what have you spent your morning doing?
Yeah, I spent my morning flying to Miami. I had a 8:40 flight out, and I actually literally just got to the hotel like a half hour ago, and only got some food real quick and sat down here. But that explains the festive background for those listening to the pod, not watching. There's like this floral sort of pattern on the wall behind me, so I guess that's just the Miami energy. I don't know, but yeah, that's my day. I flew to Miami doing the pod, and then to turn the Lions on after. So I'm curious to see what this contrast is going to be.
Yes. So Omari gets the Miami Energy Hotel in one of the sexiest cities in the United States. I am in my 5-year-old son's bedroom recording. So start off with that. I also spent my morning not flying to Miami, but with my 70-year-old father, we were out building fence around some Milo stocks for some volunteer wheat for our cattle. So I was building fence with my father this morning, watching a beautiful Kansas sunrise. So that is the difference. You were flying above the clouds, looking at the sun from an airplane. I was watching it from a wheat field that will be occupied by how many ever head of cattle in the next couple of weeks.
If it makes you feel any better, I got the middle seat, so I didn't see any sun. Fill us in, just fill us in on this fence, Bryce. What's are we talking picket wood fence? Are we talking like metal gate? Like, what are we doing with the fence here?
So it's like, think of rebar that's in cement. You know what I'm talking about there? So it's essentially that, and you pound it into the ground with a hammer, like the length of a normal hammer, but has like a sledgehammer head on it. Because, I mean, you pound that into the ground, and then it has insulators on it that allows an electric wire to go around the perimeter of where you would like to keep your cattle.
That's honestly more interesting than the flight. Like, that is like, this is a whole topic I know nothing about.
It has to be something you can put up and put back because it's surrounding farm ground. So it's like, it's wheat that we would cut or have cut and stuff like that. You can't just put a permanent fence there because we also have to farm this ground with, again, whatever we would like to grow. So
the more you explain it, the more questions I have. At some point, we're just gonna have to do like a Bryce AMA on his behind the scenes life, because this is like, the more you talk, the more I'm just like, we could talk about this for 30 minutes. Like, you're giving me
I don't say cement wrong, Wes. Do I say cement wrong?
Cement.
Whatever. Wes said he mowed the leaves this morning. Go watch the Lions game, everybody. I'm not going to take this morning. Michael says aggressive counter program to the Lions game. Listen, guys, we just outlined it. Omari's flying to Miami. Wes has a life. I'm still in high school football season. We have like our Sunday meetings to prepare for the week. Sometimes our schedules just work where, yes, we have to counter program the Detroit Lions. Hopefully you guys are watching while listening to us, or you're listening/watching after the fact. But this is just when it worked. So before we get going, Omari, I do want to plug the Motor City Hoops Substack, guys. I'm putting out analysis and notes after every single game. I had like 4.5 pages after the Celtics game on Saturday night. That was a fun one. Obviously, we'll talk about it here. And then you guys need to be listening to reading Omari Sankofa on the Detroit Free Press website, the Pistons beat writer for you guys to be following on Twitter. Anything else I can plug for everybody to find your content?
No, I think we're all set. I think we're all plugged, unless there's something that's slipping my mind, in which case I'll plug it towards the end. But here's my dad. So when I was a kid, I pronounced Oprah Winfrey, Oprah Winsky.
Yes.
I will clarify. I was like 4 or 5 years old.
No. That's all the context we need. Thank you, Mr. Sankofa.
I was a child.
Let's talk Detroit Pistons basketball.
Still in bibs. when I did that. But okay, no, we will talk Pistons basketball. Let's go ahead and start with last night, the Celtics game, since that's the most recent and probably the best game they've played so far. Bryce, just in general, what was the difference for you in that second half? I mean, the difference obviously was execution. I mean, they were giving up wide open three after wide open three in the first half, but just what did you notice that enabled that 23-point comeback to that extent? Because I mean, obviously to go from 16 made threes to 6 in the second half is a pretty big flip.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it was just like the Celtics didn't shoot as on fire as what they
Yeah.
were in the first half. Like there was part of I want to mention a stretch that was really important to me, and that was actually the end of the second quarter, Omari, where the Pistons were down 44-64, and Detroit had called a timeout. The Celtics had hit 15 threes at that point, and Detroit went on a run right there. So they actually got another miss. The Boston did. They trapped Cade after timeout. Boston's actually really good after timeout, switching up their defenses. But Tatum hits another three. So now they go down 23. Ivy gets a transition three. Didn't love the process, but he made it. Ivy gets downhill, finishes again. Cade corner catch and shoot three. Duren free throw. Cade gets Duren for the lob, and it's within 12. So I want to make sure we highlight that. And we mentioned that the end of the first half was important to allow them to even have the opportunity to show the second half that they did. My biggest takeaway was I think that's a 30-point blowout loss last year where Marcus Sasser, Wendell Moore, and company are finishing that game in the fourth quarter. I like the resolve. I like the fight because it looked like they were on the brink of getting blown out. Cade and Ivy pressured the paint over and over and over in that game. At the end of the day, they lost the math game. They killed them in the paint, but obviously they lost the three-point shooting. But I just love that they continue to play. And really, they didn't get a good Tobias Harris game, Omari. And I thought Cade and Ivy really kind of just took the team. I know Cade wasn't efficient. I'm sure we'll talk about the turnovers. I realize the end of the game stuff that people are mentioning, but I thought them being able to come back like that was really impressive.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that sequence where they cut it from 23 to 12 and got the game back within reason. Going into the third quarter to an extent, because we've seen the team, take that last punch to the gut and then sort of collapse, and then maybe there's a comeback attempt with like 5 minutes left, but there's no chance of the game being won. And I mean, last night they just started hitting timely three after timely three. I know Boston started the game off 16 for 28 from three, which is unsustainably hot, obviously. But at the same time, again,
maybe not for them. Maybe not for them, Amari.
Yeah, maybe not for them, because they tied the regular season record for threes on Tuesday with 29. And I actually mentioned it in the story I wrote last night, but they had the best offensive rating of all time last season, right? Which was like 122.2. Through 3 games this season, their offensive rating is 129. So they have just been on a completely different level. And you talk about moral victories or this and that, but this Boston Celtics team is like the Monstars, essentially. And for the Pistons to play them significantly better than the Knicks did, and they blew out the Wizards a couple nights before. And this was on the second half of a back-to-back. And I know it's game 3, so it's not like they have the wear and tear of the season yet, but I just thought this was an effort an effort game and the type of recovery that we normally didn't see last season. I mean, they completely dominated the third quarter, and they were like maybe a shot attempt away from being able to send the game into overtime and just hang on to that lead too. So as far as losses go, that's probably one of the better losses you can have.
Yeah, I mean, I was really interested to see what they look like on the second of a back-to-back. In my notes, I put like I didn't have any expectations for a victory in this one, and we'll talk. Eventually, this team has to win a game, right?
Yeah.
Like my vibes right now are still somewhat positive, and I was looking at B-Ball Reference right now. Like their SRS score is 8th in the NBA. Now that's a very simple rating system that takes in point differential and strength of schedule. I know if Pistons fans don't want to hear it after a 14-win season, this team has played the defending champs who were a juggernaut and looked to be so to start the regular season. The Indiana Pacers, who were in the conference finals last year and are healthy, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, who were in the conference semifinals last year and were healthy. Now, they got to win a game. Like that all sounds great, and it's cool that they're competitive, and I think they're more watchable right now than what I remember of last season. Like I enjoy and have fun, and a lot of the ratings, Omari, what is it? Offensive rating, they're 16th. Defensive rating, they're 24th. A lot of the numbers are good. eventually it has to turn into wins. Cade has to close one out. They got to find or they got to blow somebody out or something like that. And against some good teams, I wonder how much differently if they would have finished off that Indiana game, how much differently everybody would feel right now. Even if they were 1-2, like what if they knock off Indiana, lose to Cleveland the same way, which was a 12-point loss, and then have this just like kind of heartbreaking but superbly, competitive game against the Celtics. I think the vibes right now would feel pretty good considering the 3 games they've played.
I think so. And I think what's difficult when you start 0-3, I mean, besides just starting 0-3, but when it comes to, like Malik Beasley last night said, I've been on teams that are good, bad. We're better than our record right now. And he's saying run the cusp, but really, being there. The chemistry's good. The compete level's been good. But until you get that win to show for it, like from a fan standpoint, it probably doesn't feel satisfying, right? Like, and especially after we've seen these types of games in the past. They went to Miami in the opener last season, and Cade went off, and I think they forced overtime and lost. But it's like, the Pistons are ready, type of opening season game, and then they end up beating Chicago, right? So I think they beat Charlotte after that too. So you're 2-1, but I guess that kind of goes with it too, though, right? Is that after like 3 games, you don't know what a team is. It's just such a small sample size that we could look back at this a month from now and say, well, maybe that 0-3 wasn't too bad because they lost to good teams, and then they went and took care of some other games. So they just need more wins to back it up. I think they have been better than maybe an 0-3 team would look normally, and they have looked better to me than they have most points last season and the season before. But you just have to have something in the win column to give credits to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where it's at now. I think they've shown through 3 games that they can be competitive. They can play a lot better. I don't want to get into individual play yet because, I mean, obviously we're going to do that, with a few guys specifically, but it looks like a more competent team. I think in general, a lot of the defense is better. We knew this wasn't going to be an average defense, but it is better. The offensive spacing has already proven to be effective. They've overcome some adversity in terms of getting down and all of that, but it's eventually has to result into wins. And whether it's 20 turnovers that keep you from winning or not being able to execute in the fourth quarter or whatever it is, they have to figure it out where other teams' best players are making big time plays in those moments. And they got to get that from Cade and J.I. and then other guys. I thought Drew Holiday actually had the biggest sequence of the night for the Boston Celtics. He had back-to-back 3-pointers when the Detroit Pistons had gone up 6, and then in a transition situation, ripped it from J.I. and then ripped it from Tobias Harris in like a 2-second span and had it going back the other way. Derek White had an insane block on a Cade Cunningham like backdoor action, and those are the kind of plays that Detroit needs, not just from Cade and J.I., but Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, all of these different guys, and we just haven't seen them do it to get a win yet. So I think the vibes are good. I like the energy. I like how the team looks. Is there anything other than just saying they have to get some wins, right? Like, I think we both agree they got to get some wins eventually. Is there anything else that has stood out overly positive, negative, anything like that before we get into individual players?
Yeah. I would say just the way that they've been able to ramp up the intensity on defense. Like I thought last night in the second half, and I thought Cade had, a really good defensive stretch as well. Not to get into individuals yet, but it seems like this team does have a gear on defense that they can get to. I think we saw it during preseason. We saw it early against Indiana. We saw it some last night. Not as much against Cleveland, but is that going to be what this team can fall back on? We know that they're going to hit shots. You mentioned their offensive rating being all right, but I think just seeing that gear defensively, and they still have some things to work on. Like Al Horford can't take 5 wide open threes in the first half, but but it does seem like there's an overall want to and a level of execution that we haven't seen. And I've not just seen a full game of them just playing bad defense. There have always been extended stretches of them locking down and showing that they can get to that next stage.
Some of that Horford stuff was also like they were having confusion with it looked like to me the big was calling ice, And then the guard wasn't defending it like ice. So in ice, you force the ball handler away from the screen to the sideline. So that's the side of the screen the big is on. The guard can then not let the ball handler go over the screen because your big isn't there. And it happened a couple times. So on the Horford one, I think it was Cade led him over the screen. Well, now Duran's late helping and gets confusing, and then they hit the pick and pop. Actually, Stu and Ron Holland did it in, I believe, the first quarter, they did it later anyway, and it resulted in a Tatum 3-point make. So there's a little bit of communication stuff there, whether somebody needs to talk louder or needs to happen sooner or whatever. And some of those are because of that. I actually thought they did decent with Miles Turner. I was terrified for that game. They did in the first half, I guess, with Miles Turner. They kept him from knocking down 3-pointers, but obviously this stretch big thing continues to be an issue for them defensively. Anything offensively, I thought the first quarter it was a little bit stagnant. Then it got going a little bit. I think they have a tendency, they can get a little bit ISO-y. Like Cade can pound the ball sometimes. J.I. can do it. Tobias, when we talk about him, I'm going to bring that up. I like it when things are flowing, Omari. Right now, in terms of pace, they are 21st in the NBA. So I think sometimes we feel like they're playing fast, but the numbers say it's still bottom third in the league.
And they do have a lot of half-court possessions that I think do kind of stall out. And you like maybe you're not getting the matchup you want or the angle you want. And then it's with Cade, with some sort of ISO possession or Tobias or Ivy. And, I think Cade overall has been pretty solid in those ISO situations. But with that, he's turned the ball over a lot. And, I thought this last season, like, I just feel like J.I. or somebody just needs to be conditioned to just bail Cade out sometimes. Like if a possession gets stagnant, come up, get the ball, rescreen, reset, do something, but just keep it moving because they have a tendency to pound the ball here and there. And it's game 3. They're still learning a new system. And I think we've seen the opposite where, the ball's moved really, really well and they're generating easy looks at the rim and from 3. And we saw some of that during preseason. I think we've seen that in spurts, but that's something that they will absolutely have to figure out.
So Wes brings up to both of your points, young teams usually play up down to their opponent. The Pistons generally didn't do that last year. I think what Wes is referencing is they almost just always played down to their level. And they did this in these 3 games. They played up to the level of competition. What will be interesting now is when they do get to play some of the other teams, the Wizards, the Nets, the Jazz, the Blazers, even some teams that are a little bit more middle of the pack, Omari, or teams that aren't healthy, right? Like whenever they get to play a team, even like the Sixers without 2 of their 3 best players, can they play to a good enough level to win those games? All we've seen them right now is play relatively healthy, very good teams in the East. 2 of these teams undefeated. I realize 2 of those games are against the Pistons. I understand that. But 2 very good teams, 3 very good teams, 2 undefeated. And we've seen them play very competitively. I'm very fascinated to see how they look against teams who either aren't healthy or aren't at this level of competition. Before we go to break and then we come back with anything from JB thus far. You've talked about the defense. I think it is improved. We've seen some different things. We've seen better rotations. Offensively, we've talked a little bit about that. Maybe rotation-wise, is there anything that surprises you? I did notice they shrunk it down even more last night in the second half. Back-to-back, Omari second night, and they go to 8 dudes in the second half. Ron Holland didn't even get in. Anything that has surprised you with the rotations thus far?
No, nothing super surprising. Definitely stood out that he cut the rotation down in an effort to win that game. And, like that's something that I saw him do in Memphis. He did that in Cleveland, even against the Pistons last season. Like he'll trim it to 8 guys if you need to, which I think when you're looking at the balance between, one hand, you have to find opportunities for guys and it's a growth oriented season. But you still have to put players in a position to win too. And, if you have a young guy that's not getting it done early, I think it speaks to their depth that he can go in a different direction. Even in a situation like late in the game, like you had Malik Beasley, who had been pretty hot and, he rode Tim Hardaway Jr., but Hardaway still ended up hitting a pretty big 3 down the stretch. So I guess for me, it's more so seeing which trust players have or what JB has in his players trust wise. Is it just going to be the vets in those late moments, which probably works out pretty well when you have guys that could shoot. But yeah, rotation wise, I think he's probably been a bit more leaning toward, all right, like let's get this done, let's get this win. And they probably need that at this point. I don't know how many minutes they have to just kind of let guys develop, especially if it's a game that's within 12, 13 points.
Yeah, no, I think what he's done rotational, I think I'm a little surprised with the starting lineup. THJ was not a guy I anticipated being there. I thought maybe it'd be Beasley if it was one of those guys. Obviously, I had really thought it was going to be Fontecchio. Just looking at minutes, Cade is playing a lot, which is good to see. He's been able to do it, 37 minutes. I think what surprised me the most, Fontecchio's under 18, Isaiah Stewart's under 16. That's a little bit. I know it'll start to balance out a little bit as guys are in and out of the lineup and they'll have to play a little bit more. That's a little bit surprising to me. And as Wes brings up, nice to have vets on the team that are worth a coach leaning on when he gets to a win. Yeah, like they have these guys. I know people were frustrated with Harris coming back in the fourth last night. I wouldn't have hated to see him not. I wonder if Fontecchio was just getting to a minute situation where they felt like they needed to give him a rest. So we'll continue to watch that, especially if they don't win games, if they continue to lose, does he switch things up? If we get Asar back, what ends up happening there? How does he work into the rotation? But I think it is time to start talking about some of the individual players. Probably should start with Cade Cunningham or Jaden Ivey. So when we get back from this short break, Omari, let's talk about those guys in particular.
All right, we're back with segment 2, and let's go ahead and dive into Cade. I think there's been a lot of good. I think he's gotten to his spots really well. I like that he's going to the post game a little bit more to take advantage of certain matchups. We've talked about post Cade for so long, and it seems like he's had at least 2 attempts, either jump hooks or whatever per game so far. I'd have to go look, but I've enjoyed seeing that aspect for him. But the turnovers, right? You have 16 turnovers in your last 2 games. And just when you handle the ball as much as he does, you're going to have those types of games. But he turned it over almost 5 times per game early last season. He, actually did pretty well during preseason and through most of last season as well. But then it's starting to trend up again. For you, overall, what's your take on Cade? And as far as the turnovers, I guess, is your concern level a little bit higher than it was before, or where are you there?
Yeah, so as Michael brings up, you guys might get to this organically. The Cade turnover numbers are big. Have you looked at the cause? I think it's the same cause it's always been. He has careless turnovers. Listen, I love Cade. I'm the biggest Cade defender. These 3 games have only given me more confidence in Cade Cunningham and the other guy we're going to talk about, Jaden Ivey. I think there's a lot of things to be excited about, but eventually Cade has to stop turning the ball over in the ways that he's turning it over. And he should have the most turnovers on the team. I want to be clear about that. He should have a high percentage of the turnovers, but so many of them, Omari, are not him like penetrating into the lane and then just like, trying to be aggressive and somebody digs it away from him. So many to me are what I would tag as careless. He has to stop throwing it to a guy jumping into a passing lane because they read the play and he just, doesn't recognize it. I think those are the ones. Those are the biggest ones for me, is that he has to get rid of those ones. He gets rid of those ones and I can handle drive into the lane and, whatever, and make some mistake. Those ones are going to happen. There was multiple in this Celtics game that I thought like they weren't aggressive turnovers. They were completely careless. And so that's my biggest thing with Cade right now. I have 2 things with Cade. That's by far number 1, is getting rid of those turnovers.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. It's I would say he probably has 2-3 a game, but he has a high turnover game. That's just like you could cut those out pretty easily. Whether it's just his handle being too loose when the defender's digging down on him, or he had one, and I guess this goes both ways. But the inbounds to Duren, in Cleveland, where he just throws it a little too hard, and Duren's trying to not go behind the half court line. And, sometimes Cade drives without a plan and he telegraphs the pass, and it's stuff like that. Right. And they tend to come in bunches too. And that was what we noticed a lot last season as well. I would say ultimately, that's something that's correctable, right? Like, that's not to be something that you inherently can't fix. And, high turnover games here and there don't necessarily make me think, oh, this guy can't be a point guard, because he is a good playmaker overall. He creates opportunities for his teammates. Like, he sees the floor like a point guard. That's not really the concern for me. You've had some other players who have been extremely high turnover prone, who have made all-star games and whatnot. So it's not absolutely killer, but they do tend to happen in bunches, and that's probably the one habit that he's got to snuff out that he's going into year 4.
I want to touch on this. AA says, are we ready to talk about how Cade is not a point guard? There's a lot more Chris Middleton and Devin Booker. I will just quickly say I'm not ready to have that conversation. Cade has been a point guard his whole life. I think it's easy and I do it at times, to say, hey, go play a different position. Even if he wasn't playing good at point guard, I think trying to change the mindset of somebody who has always played with the ball in his hands, I just don't think that that's as easy as what people think sometimes. So if you just think he's not good at point guard, I don't agree with that, but I would understand that. But I don't think you can ever ask Cade to go play exclusively off the ball in that role. Wes brings up there's probably 3 types of Cade turnovers: careless, chemistry, good play by the defense. I think that's right. We got to get rid of the careless ones. You can live with chemistry ones, especially early in a season where he thinks Malik Beasley's going to hammer to the corner and Malik doesn't, or they think he's going to curl off a screen, but he pops. You can handle those ones. And then you can absolutely handle ones where Alex Caruso just makes an insane weak side rotation or something like that. I want to see him make a conscious decision. And to your point, Omari, it is fixable, but Cade has to consciously think about, I'm just going to take care of the ball better. And even if that means he's 3% less aggressive, I would rather have that, because right now he's averaging 6 a game. And obviously that's not something, and I don't think that number is going to hold, but you can't be doing that. He's got to be better with that. Hopefully it does improve. I haven't had a chance to read the article yet, but I would like for you to kind of explain to me, because I know did you make the argument that it isn't something to be worried about based off history, and maybe for any of our listeners that haven't had a chance to read that yet either?
Yeah, so I wrote about this after the game on Wednesday. No, I'm sorry. What's the day? Sunday? When did they play the Cavs?
It is
Friday.
Sunday.
They played the Cavs Friday. About, see, hey, it's already, it's regular season. Like, I'm not gonna know what day it is.
No doubt.
No doubt. I would say that I don't even know what
you were talking about the Cade turnover article. Cade turnover.
Yeah.
Article.
So he averaged 4.8 turnovers per game, almost 5 through his first 16 games last season. And he was leading the NBA in turnovers for a little while there. And like after that, like it was just a complete turnaround. I think he played 46 games after that, and it cut down to 3, and his assists went up. So he went from averaging like 5 turnovers and 7 assists to like 8 assists and 3 turnovers. So it was a complete turnaround 16 games into the season. And a guy that averaged 3 turnovers a game for the majority of the season, for essentially the last 3/4 of it last season, even with all the roster shuffling and the losing and this and that, he just wasn't turnover prone, for that long. And I thought during preseason as well, he really wasn't turnover prone. I don't know if he had a game with more than 3 turnovers out of the 5 he played. So I'll look at that, and that tells me that the 9 turnover game against the Cavs was an outlier. But when you do it again the next night and you have 7, that's when it becomes okay. Like now we have 2 in a row, and it's just one of those things where as you get a larger sample size, you'll know if these are just outliers or if they're starting to trend back up again. So I'd be curious to see just over the next 7-8 games how he's able to cut that down, or if he's able to cut that down.
Mel75 says, LOL, regular season Omari. Can you guys imagine what postseason Omari will be like? If we ever get postseason Omari, that will be amazing to see. Let's go ahead and get the other negative or question I have around Cade before. And I do want to get positive. So please, let's not switch to Jaden Ivey or anybody else before we get to the positive, because we spend a lot on negative. And I think for a guy who's averaging 27, 8, and 5, it's a little bit negative right now, but that's okay. I think it's fair. I like the 3-point volume from Cade. He's taking almost 7 a game, which I love, but it's at 30%. So I think that's we don't have to dive into this. We kind of understand he's got to make shots, right? I would like to see Cade get more catch and shoot threes. I know a lot of people talk about the dribble three. Yes, I agree with that, but he does play a little bit off the ball. So we just had like this whole point guard conversation where I'm like, yes, he needs the ball in his hand, but we've seen him play a little more off the ball. I like whenever he takes these catch and shoot ones where somebody else has broken down the defense and he can just step in with rhythm. So I like the number of attempts from Cade right now. Would like to see obviously that percentage go ahead and tick up around 35 or so from 3.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that I think he's shown that he is a good 3-point shooter. I think a lot of this, you mentioned the catch and shoot threes. He has to generate a lot of his own attempts, and I think he is a player that can do that, especially when he's in a rhythm. But you don't necessarily want him right off the bat. just taking step backs as like his first couple attempts. Like I think Tobias, like once Tobias gets going, that'll relieve a lot of pressure off of Cade and allow him to settle into more catch and shoot attempts. I'm also curious, like just depending on who else they're able to get involved in a playmaking role. Maybe they get Duren involved in a bit more. I thought he's had some good reads here and there during preseason. But to me, a lot of that's just making Cade's life easier. You don't want him to have to self-create every three. I think he shot 36% last year. After that cold start, he shot like 38% most of the season. So I think that'll trick back up. But at the same time, he's got to find his comfort level within this offense where it just seems like he shifts between playmaking, okay, now I'm scoring, now I'm playmaking, now I'm scoring, just finding that equilibrium.
Okay, so now can we talk about what I think has been the most impressive from Cade?
Yes.
I think defensively. I think Cade's been really, really good defensively. I think I don't know if I'm ready to call him a positive defender yet. I think he's at least neutral. I think there's no question through 3 games, he's been a neutral defender. He was guarding Jason Tatum at times last night, especially in the second half. I think his off-ball defense has been incredible. I think he's rotating all of that stuff. He had a chase down block in that Celtics game.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's been very good. He had another weak side rim protection that paired with the transition lob to Duren. That was one where he came over and he got the block. The ball bounced around. He came in from out of bounds. He attacks down the middle of the court in transition and throws the lob to Duren. I think he's been very good defensively, and I want to make sure we, at least for me, acknowledge that because I've been, so AA says I like what I saw from Cade defensively. I've been hard on his defense, the same way we have been on JI and JD. I think he's been very good this year. And like I said, I think it's at least neutral, if not good, through 3 games so far this year.
Yeah, I've been impressed with what he's done defensively as well. And he's actually been one of the players leading the charge, I think, on that end of the floor. And we've seen Cade in spurts play really strong defense. He's got excellent timing when it comes to blocks and things of that sort. You mentioned the chase down block, which we see here and there. We don't see it a lot, but when we do see it, it's like that's not a skill that all players have. And he's able to do it with enough consistency that, again, because like Wes here mentions, Cade essentially playing some free safety being fun. The more he's able to do that, the more he could probably, be able to rack those up a little bit more. But I mean, he's 6'6", 7-foot wingspan. And, I think of all the players the Pistons have, he probably is the one who has the best understanding of what's happening on the court at all times. And, it's like JB just went into his ear and said, just go out there and just try to wreak havoc, we trust you to make the right decisions. And that's really key. I made this comparison a while back, and it's not a 1-1 comparison, but, I always saw Cade as maybe his ceiling being like a Jimmy Butler type, and one of the things Jimmy Butler is really great at, of course, is defense and being able to lead teams on that end of the floor. So for Cade, it's just sustaining this, right? We've seen him do it in spurts, but if he can sustain this for a full season, then you're really talking about him being one of the better 2-way players in the league at that point. Because like I said earlier, I think the 3-point shooting is going to come, and the turnovers so far have not been an issue outside of these last 2 games.
Yeah, so as Harry says, 2-way Cade going to result in more assists, just like, the situation we broke down. It's interesting that you bring up like the consistency of it. After the Cavs game, or during the Cavs game, I said the defensive activity has been awesome so far this year for Cade. And then I made a little note. I was excited to see how he looked Saturday night versus Celtics when they were playing a back-to-back. So to then see such a positive defensive effort and impact from him on Saturday night versus the best offense in the league on the second night of a back-to-back, that is really encouraging, again, when Cade is playing 37 minutes a night. Now, like you mentioned, we're the first week of the season, so we haven't played enough where the legs start to really wear down and the season drags out and all of that. But I don't think we've ever seen him be this good as a 2-way player in his career. I think this is the best we have seen Cade play. If you forget the 3-point percentage, Omari, again, he is 27, 8, 5, 2 stocks on 48% from the field, 83% from the free throw line. Again, 30% from 3. Like, if he gets a 35% from 3 and brings those turnover numbers down, That's a big time player. That is the exact type of player that we've been talking about. And I think both of you believe that he can be. So while there are some real negatives and concerns through these 3 games with the turnovers and the 3-point percentage, there's no doubt that the player a lot of us believe Cade can be is still kind of shining through in these 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, 1.3 blocks through 3 games. Like again, Cade seems like a guy who can continue to string that type of impact at the rim together. 6'6", 7 feet. Like he should absolutely be one of the most versatile defenders on this team. I think we've seen that. Let's go ahead and get to Jaden Ivey while we still have some time left in the second segment. We've talked about the scoring a lot, but let's just talk about it a little bit more. I think he was like 6 for 7 last night to start the game, and the only miss was like a heave at the end of the first quarter. But beyond that, I think his handle's been a lot sharper. I think he's picked his spots getting to the rim a lot better. There haven't been as many moments where he's getting sped up and missing layups that he probably should have gotten. I thought he moved the ball pretty well last night. He's had 6 assists, and including preseason, we're now coming up on almost a month of Jaden Ivey just consistently being their all-around best scorer. So I'm curious what stood out to you. But like the more I watch J.I. do this, the more I think that this is the player he's going to be for the majority of the season.
He's in the role that we always said he needed to be in,
Yep.
Omari. He's playing off of Cade Cunningham. I continue to make notes that they're playing off of each other. They're playing with each other. They're not necessarily playing your turn, my turn. I think there's all these questions about the fit of Cade and J.I. I don't have those concerns. I guess you could say there's spacing concerns, but those spacing concerns go away, funny enough, when you put real floor spacers around them, right? Like the spacing on the floor this year has been awesome. And Tobias Harris is shooting, what is he shooting this year? 21% from 3 right now. Like he's not even knocking down shots. So when you put real floor spacing around these two, think if there was a stretch big, and that's not a knock on Jalen Duren. I'm just saying like you could, like they can play together, I guess is my point. And I feel a little bit justified because I've always felt this way. It is a 3-game sample. Maybe I'll prove him to be wrong over the long term. And then you stagger him into the second unit and let him go from there. So I think he's been really good. I love the actions where he catches it downhill coming off a staggered or off a cut or relocation at the 3-point line. I love seeing him get those opportunities. Omari, I don't know what the numbers say. He's been a walking paint touch through 3 games. Nobody, not a single team yet, has been able to keep that guy out of the lane. With J.I., it comes down to, is he going to make the layup? Is he going to make the right decision? If he drives and kick, is he going to make the pass? Is it going to be on target? But nobody is keeping him out of the lane. He's still doing the little things. He's averaging 2 offensive rebounds per game right now. His assists are back up. I know that's partially due to his minutes. And again, I don't think his defense has been as good as Cade's, but I think his defense continues to take little baby steps, and he's taking the big time matchups there this year, right? He took Halliburton, he took Donovan Mitchell. He's taking the really, really tough matchups defensively.
So here's a fun number when you talk about J.I. just getting to the rim. And again, I think he's just fully aware that he can get there pretty much whenever he wants, and that there's not a single player that can stay in front of him. Like he blew past Jaylen Brown a couple times last night. So through 3 games, he is getting to the rim for 58% of his shot attempts. 58% of them are at the rim. He's always been above average, but he was in the 95th. I'm sorry, he was in the 90th percentile last season. 35% of his shots were at the rim. And he's at 58 through 3 games.
Wow. Okay.
So through 3 games, he is 23 percentage points higher as far as his shot attempts at the rim. And last season, he was already in the 90th percentile. So that just shows you that he's just taking one step and he's there, right? Like he's not worrying about anything. But the accuracy is a little bit higher too. He shot 59% at the rim last season, which for a combo guard, was not great. They put that in the 38th percentile. Right now, he's in the 62nd, which is a little bit lower than I thought it would be. But I think he's also had to maybe create a bit more out of those. I thought during preseason, he took a lot of shots already in motion, right? And it's been a little bit more of him creating here and there during the regular season, which isn't bad. But the bottom line is that he's somebody who clearly is aware of his gifts and how he can impact the game. And that's had a really big boost in his efficiency so far.
Yeah, I mean, looking just at B-ball reference, it's a lot of the same numbers. They had 0 to 3 feet last year. 22% of his field goal attempts were from there. Right now it's at 38%. Like every number screams to this guy is getting downhill. I also want to make a quick point. He creates even more than the assist sometimes. So there was a play in the Cavaliers game. He attacked, drove, kicked. He hit Tobias Harris. Harris makes the one more pass to Cade. Cade knocks down the three. Well, who gets the assist there? Tobias gets the assist. But who created the shot attempt? Jaden Ivey did. So I bet if you go back and look at a lot of stuff, there are times where he's the one breaking down the defense initially, Omari, and then he may not be the guy that gets the assist because it's swing or one more or, attack and then a pass, all of that. We got to go to a break. When we come back, I do want to stay on J.I. There's an interesting question about him from the chat. So we'll go with that, and then we can kind of quickly hit the other players on the roster.
All right, we're back with segment 3. And Bryce, I know you have some more thoughts on Ivy. I have some too, but I'll go ahead and let you take it away.
Yeah, so Arthur says, do you think the intention going to the season was Ivy being the second option, or is it Ivy taking the spot, or is it because there just isn't anyone else there able to do so? I think it should have been the intention. I think there's a little bit. Wes, you put up a 2. Does that mean you thought it was Ivy taking advantage of the opportunity? Yet Wes is shaking his head. I think the opportunity was there because we've said this about Tobias. They paid Tobias a lot of money, but I don't think Tobias is a guy that has to be the number 2 option. Sometimes doesn't look like he wants to be the number 2 option. He can be for stretches when you need it, but they didn't bring anybody in. Like this was the argument against Brandon Ingram or Zach LaVine or somebody like that, right? It's still available. And through 3 games, J.I. has taken advantage of this opportunity.
No, he absolutely has. And I would agree. I think it's a little bit of 2 as well. Ivy just taking the spot, but also JB's talked so much about just his confidence, right? Making sure he stays confident, making sure he stays aggressive. And, I think this coaching staff went into the season with the understanding that, maybe you don't say, yeah, you're going to be number 2, you're going to be number 3, but that Ivy absolutely could be somebody who could occupy that role. And so far, he's absolutely going out and seized it. One more number I wanted to share from Cleaning the Glass for Jaden Ivey, because I did see a comment earlier that he still gets fouled a lot and doesn't get calls, which is interesting because I do think there are some calls that he doesn't get. But I will also say J.I. has always had a really high shooting foul percentage, which is just what percentage of a player's shot attempts was he fouled on. He was in the 94th percentile as a rookie and in the 94th last season. Last season, he got fouled on 13.8% of his shots. He's at 20.1% right now. So that's, again, like a 7 point percentage increase when he was already in the 94th percentile last season. So my takeaway from all of this is that J.I. should probably be taking more shots. That's what I'm seeing right now. He is a guy that should be taking more shots based on how he's producing right now.
The only thing I will say is, or he may be taking the exact right amount of shots.
Or that,
right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he's right at 16. Maybe this is the perfect spot for him. He's averaging, Omari, these are J.I.'s numbers. 22, 5, and 5. You want to guess how many turnovers J.I. is averaging right now?
That was something else I was going to bring up. You have it.
Do you know it? I have 1.3.
1.3 against 5 assists.
He has 4 turnovers on the season. Right now, he has 14 assists, 4 turnovers, and he's getting to the line almost 7 times a game. That is real stuff. And he's only, you know what? That's while only shooting 33% from 3. So we always talk about these 3-point shooting numbers with J.I. He's averaging 22, 5, and 5 on very good efficiency, almost 50% from the field, almost 7 attempts at the free throw line, not turning it over, and he's only shooting 33% from 3. So he can do this while shooting 33% from 3. What if he does ever shoot 35 or 36 or like 39% on catch and shoot where people know they have to close out to him? We talked about him having a big year. And again, shout out to the listener that hit me up and said, hey, you guys talk about the spacing for Cade, but I think it's going to be even better for J.I. That was a great point. And again, it holds true through the first week of the season. I'm very excited about what we've seen from Cade, but I think I'm even more excited to see J.I. play this well what it comes down to now is, you mentioned it earlier, consistency, right, Omari? We have to see it continue through the second week, through the first month, whenever things go down, and then can they get it back up? But right now, I think we've seen a lot of what we needed to see from J.I. so far this year.
No, we absolutely have. One more, I keep saying one more number. I looked at the per 100 just because I wanted to see how his numbers now
Let's
compared
do
to.
it. Yes.
Okay. So last season, per 100 possessions, he averaged 6.6 free throws a game. Right now, he is averaging 9.8.
Yep.
Like, again, it's just a skyrocket. Like, it's just like the stocks are going way, way, way up right now. Way, way up. So I would agree that J.I. has probably been to be the most impressive so far. We have about 15 minutes, so
Yeah.
there's probably
Quick
10 other
hitter.
players we can talk to. So we can, so quick hitters. What have you seen from Jalen Duren so far? I think he's had moments defensively that have been impressive. I don't know if the consistency's been there yet, but I'm curious to see what you think.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same place. There's times where I feel like the hands are better, just the hand activity. He had one late in the game where he actually like dug, like he swiped down at a ball in the lane. So it wasn't a block. Sometimes NBA.com stats it as a block. I don't know how they decide. Maybe if the offensive player is off the floor or whatever. But I have seen that the rim protection numbers, I don't think have held true, just in terms of, I should say, the disruption numbers. We talked about that a little bit in the preseason, how he was getting more blocks and steals. I don't think that that's been the case during the regular season. Yeah, he's back at 0.3 and 1, so down to 1.3 stocks. I think it's been a little bit better, Omari, a little bit. I still don't think it's as impactful as what I would want to see, I guess, from an anchor. And here's why I shouldn't say we. Here's why I put so much pressure on Duren's defense is on the offensive end. He's not a stretch guy where he's making a major impact in that way. He's been an awesome play finisher. I mean, he's shooting 87% from the field. We know he's a great rebounder, especially on the offensive end. But I think the archetype of offensive player he is, and where he's not a switch defender, as people bring up kind of the perimeter defense, I think you have to be a great anchor in ball screen coverage, rim protection, those things. And I just don't think he's at that level.
No, yeah, we talk about it, but with the archetype of player he is, if you're going to be a rim rolling, rebounding, put back, lob type of center, you have to be good defensively, and that's just like a non-negotiable, because there are too many guys in the league who can do a lot of that stuff, but also give you more on the defensive end. I do think he's had at least one nice verticality contest
Yes.
a night.
Yes.
He had one last night against Jaylen Brown that was
Yes,
just like perfect. He got up both hands. He had one against the Pacers. I forget against who, but it was perfect. He's had them here and there. Like, so you see those moments. Like, I still think when it comes to like navigating screens and communicating and things like that, like with Al Horford getting open as often as he did. You mentioned it earlier, like how much of that was on Duren and how much of it was on the guard. But all I know is that it seems like centers take a lot of open threes, when they can shoot. So something's got to change there. But I'm seeing examples of him figuring things out on defense. And I don't know if he's ever going to be like a top tier defensive player, but if he could at least just be above average, like it would go a long way for this team. Is he still 21? 20, like he's still so young. He's still the second youngest player on his team. Like, I think it's easy to forget how young he is still. He's still 20 years old. He turns 21 next month. I've seen growth. Like, he's still young. I think he's figuring things out slowly, but I absolutely agree that that's the biggest key for him this season to secure his future with this team.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the verticality, because that he definitely deserves credit for that. The one you're talking about was actually right after the Cade block transition, lob to Duren. They come down the next possession. He gets the contest with verticality, and that actually led to a wide open transition corner 3-point attempt that was missed by Tobias Harris, who had a really rough night last night. Long Live Organic says, not as big as guys like AD, Gobert, Wemby, Brook Lopez. YouTube user brings up a good point. He's the only consistent rebounder. Rebounding is a part of finishing defensive possessions. More than fair, right? Like, if he's an elite, I think JD is an elite offensive rebounder. I don't think he's elite defensive rebounder, but he's a very good defensive rebounder. And that is very important to note, that he does finish off possessions with defensive rebounds. It is interesting. His rebounding numbers are actually down, as Wes points out in the chat. So Right now, he's at 9.7. He was at 11.6 last year. He's averaging roughly the same amount of offensive rebounds, Omari, throughout his whole career. It's been pretty consistent. The minutes are almost identical from this year to last year, but his defensive rebounds are actually down 2 right now. Now, again, as with everything, we've mentioned this more and, plenty. 3-game sample, but it is something to track. I do feel like at times the motor runs a little hotter on the offensive boards than the defensive boards.
No, I definitely agree with that. Let's just stick with the bigs. Let's talk about Isaiah Stewart for
Sure.
a little bit. I feel like they haven't figured out what to do with him yet. Like, I'm just gonna that's just like the best way I can put it. I feel like they have not figured out how to utilize his game. He's not really popping. He hasn't taken. I think he's taken maybe 1 3. But there haven't been too many shot attempts in general, and it just seems like he's always in like a crowd in the paint whenever they're trying to get him the ball. Like there's been some turnovers there. I think again, we know he's going to hustle. I think he's had some really good moments defensively, some tone-setting moments defensively, but offensively, I just feel like they have not figured out how to utilize him yet. And I'm just curious to the extent that you agree with that, because that's like if there's been like one glaring thing about the offense that they need to solve, that's one thing I've noticed.
He's taken 1 3.
Yeah,
that's it. Like I'm confused.
Yeah,
like I wonder if it's calculated. I wonder if it's on purpose, or if maybe JB's system doesn't allow for the big to pick and pop. I don't know. I'm confused, I guess. I'm not trying to critique anything. It just doesn't make sense to me. And we've talked about this. The Isaiah Stewart thing with the threes wasn't about him becoming a 4-man exclusively, right, Omari? I feel like those things kind of became intertwined, and that wasn't the case. Stu was always going to need to stretch the floor to be more impactful offensively, because he doesn't really pass it all that well, and he's a little bit smaller, so he's not a great lob threat. So spacing the floor was, to me, always the natural thing, and we've only seen him shoot 1, and that's just, it's confusing to me.
Yeah, I think he is a much better 3-point shooter at this point than he is around the rim. He's just like, if he's not being used like he was in college, where he's posting up and things like that. Like NBA centers are just, they're big, they're athletic, and it's just some matchups that don't favor him. I think especially in the way that they're trying to use him as more of a traditional roller. To me, he's a guy that you just spam pick and pops with. He should be, to me, at least half of his shot attempts should be threes at this point, and you could probably even get him a few mid-range looks per game too. But he should be the opposite of how they use Duren to be. Like when Isaiah Stewart comes in, you're using him the complete opposite. Right?
It's a good changeup, right? Like, don't you think
it's a good changeup?
A good changeup. I mean, in fairness, 20% of his shot attempts have been threes, because he's only taken 5 attempts the whole year. So, Wes brings up some of this is on him. So this is a fair point. This is a really good point. He passed up a few good open looks against the Pacers and Celtics. So that's always fair and important to keep in mind. I will say, I have quite a few notes for a guy that's only played 47 minutes about some rim protection and some defensive things. Like, I do think he's showed his value. I know the numbers won't pop off to you, but if you look at per 36, he averages almost 4 stocks a game. Duren's at 1.6. Like nobody else is over 2 other than Ron Holland. So I do think in those limited minutes, he shows an ability to switch at times. He's had some really good rim protection, active hands, all of that. His minutes in general have just been a little bit low, and then, just not being able to find that flow offensively, kind of his role.
Yeah, but like I meant, he has been, I think, pretty good defensively. And again, I think he is, from a versatility standpoint, I think he's the most versatile defender on this roster, because he can step up and, defend smaller guards on switches, which, still seems like it catches teams off guard here and there. Stu, he fills a really important role for this team as the backup 5, I think, especially defensively. If they could get him a flow offensively where, maybe you're running more pick and pops and, staying on him, just making sure he's aggressive, shooting when he has space. I think that could be a really good 1-2 punch with Jalen Duren, just because they're just opposite players in so many ways, but in ways that are still very useful to the modern game. But yeah, through 3 games, I've just been confused by the offensive side for Isaiah Stewart, and I don't know if I expected that coming in. It seemed like his role as a pick and pop guy seemed pretty straightforward.
So Muhammad asked, question for later: have you guys been following Jay Huff? I think he'd be a great fit for the team. Yeah, I mean, I saw Jay Huff at Summer League, and he was awesome. Like, he was awesome. And I would love that. I think there's no chance that guy is getting away from the Memphis Grizzlies right now. He's playing real rotation minutes for that team. But yeah, that's a great call, Mohammed. I just don't think there's any way you would be able to pry Jay Huff from the Memphis Grizzlies right now. They had their chance. Like, they could have taken him whenever he was available to get signed to a two-way. You know, who knows what Jay Huff wanted to do, but great call, because he is a very, very good player. Who else? Quick thoughts on Tobias. Maybe, do we need to wait on Tobias where we have a longer time to discuss it? Because I don't want to be overly negative in about 4 minutes and then leave it there. Ron Holland, maybe. Wes brings up Holland. Should we just go?
Holland. Yeah,
let's go.
Because
Holland.
We know what type of player Tobias is. So it's just a matter of if he starts to hit shots. Yeah.
So real quick, I don't want people to think we're giving Tobias Harris the week off, but I don't want it to be a 4-minute discussion. So I feel like we're about to get crushed. Oh, like, oh, you guys didn't critique Tobias Harris. I don't think he's been particularly good. I thought he was bad against Boston, but I want to have a longer conversation. We'll have a bigger sample. Same thing with Beasley, THJ. Let's talk about the rookie Ron Holland so far. Yeah. My quick thoughts, Omari, he competes his butt off, like really plays hard. I think he's going to be a real rebounder. He's been better defensively than what I thought. The offense is a struggle. He's staying confident, which I appreciate. Like, he's still willing. He pulled up in transition. Like, you talk about Stewart turning down shots, Wes. Ron Holland ain't turning down a shot. Ron Holland is getting that baby up. He is 1 for 8 right now, but he doesn't look like he's lost confidence, but the offense has some work to do.
Yeah, and we knew that coming in, that he was going to be better in transition. And if he could spot up threes, cool, but that the half court was going to be a work in progress. But as a guy, you could just maybe sprinkle in 5 to 12 minutes per night. Just get some hustle, some rebounds. Maybe he starts chirping with one of the other guys on the team and gets people
every game.
Like,
has it not been every game?
He talks, man. He's always getting into it with somebody. He was getting into it with Mathurin. He got into it with it was somebody during preseason. But there's been enough moments where we've seen that something's going to happen when he goes out there, and I think that energy is good for this team. But eventually he's going to have to add something in the half court, whether it's being able to knock down shots or just timely cutting, or it's going to have to be something. We knew as a rookie he wasn't going to have that right off the bat, but he is going to have something at some point.
Yeah, I mean, when you look, per 36 can be a little bit unfair, right? Especially when you're talking about the number of minutes, because it's like, okay, can this guy actually do what he's doing in 13 minutes, and then can you just triple it? Can he do that if he's actually playing triple the minutes? But he would average over 10 rebounds a game, Omari, and almost 3 stocks a game. I mean, those are really good, but he's not even shooting well from the field, right? Like, even from 2, he's 5 of 8 from 2. So that's half of his shots have been from 3 is the issue. So that's the thing right now. He's got to find a way to get more shots at the rim. Like you mentioned, the off-ball cutting transition than all of these threes. I like the confidence from 3, but would like him to get some more attempts going downhill. We saw he attacked a closeout a couple times. He's got to stay aggressive with that. I like the rebounding. I like the defense. I think you mentioned it. I think it'll be better suited based off what we've seen right now when it's just like, hey, 8 minutes here, 12 minutes there, quick 4-minute stretch there. But right now that offense just has a long way to go.
Yeah, offense definitely has a ways to go. Curious to see if we see him turn that around this season. Because again, I don't think the shot looks bad, and teams leave him open for threes. We're going to have plenty of opportunity to get shots up. Yeah, all I want to see from Ron Holland when he's out there, compete defensively and just stay confident. I think if he does those 2 things every time he steps out on the floor, you're going to see steady growth. And he's 19. He has plenty of time to figure stuff out while the guys in front of him figure out some more pertinent stuff right now.
So Muhammad brings up something funny, and we'll finish with this. Said, it's weird how THJ underperformed in preseason while Tobias played really well, and now the season start is complete opposite. It is kind of funny how these guys can not make shots in preseason, and then all of a sudden regular season hits. And I think it just the ebbs and flows of a season anyway. Just real quickly, floor spacing, Omari, Malik Beasley, 50% from 3 on 6.7 attempts. Tim Hardaway Jr., 47% from 3 on 5.7 attempts. Those numbers will play well for the Pistons.
You love to see that. Absolutely. They have come in and have done exactly what they were brought in to do, which is hit threes. And that's all they need to do. Quite frankly, is hit threes.
All right. I have to go to a high school football coaches meeting to prepare for our playoff game this week. So we're going to cut it off there.
Good
Guys,
luck.
thanks. We will be back next week. Guys, we'll figure out the day with the schedule. Sometimes it may be Sunday after the game. I think it's an afternoon game. It may be Tuesday because I think it's a back-to-back Sunday, Monday. We will just have to figure it out. So stay tuned. Thank you for everybody that tuned in. Ashton was with us here. Great work. We appreciate it, Ashton. Rate, subscribe, share, all of that stuff. And hopefully this is something you're listening to after a Lions win. If you didn't get to join us live, Omari, take it away, my guy.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to y'all next week. So big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and we'll talk to you guys after Game 6.